Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Week 3 of the Six Nations is upon us. Ireland hosting Wales on Saturday afternoon at the Aviva Stadium, as well as Scotland against England and France versus Italy. We'll be looking ahead to those games with Bernard Jackman and JP Cooney, who are with me this morning. Before we get into the Six Nations, though, fellas, it looks like we've got some pretty big news in the United Rugby Championship. It was reported last night by the Sunday Independent's Brendan Fanning that Ulster head coach Dan McFarland is to step down with immediate effect. McFarland's been in charge since 2018 and oversaw some good years at Ulster, but I suppose probably a bit of a decline in the last year or so, culminating with a hugely disappointing Champions Cup campaign where in the final round they were hockeyed away to Harlequins, and a very, very disappointing defeat on Sunday against the Ospreys, which leaves them 8th in the URC. And I think coming from the post-match interview, Birch, that Dan gave after that defeat to the Ospreys, I don't want to say the writing was on the wall, but he certainly looked like a man under intense pressure.
Yeah, look, at 6 years is actually a long time in pro coaching, and never mind a province like Ulster where there's an expectation to maybe win silverware, which obviously it's a while since they have. But I think Dan did a brilliant job, I suppose, steadying the ship. Like, let's not forget when he came in, it was in a pretty bad place. There'd been high turnover of coaches. Not many people wanted the job, and he came in and got stuck into it. And certainly, it looked for a long time like they were on the right track. Unfortunately, over the last year, obviously that home defeat to Connacht in the playoffs last year was a blow. There was a backlash around the 4G pitch by certain fans. I think was it 10 players or more left last summer, and unfortunately, a lot of them certainly were talking off the record to journalists around the vibe and the environment, and just things haven't really picked up. Even though the results are far from disasters. In the URC in particular, and they are 8th, but they play Dragons next, and at home they'll win that in 2 weeks' time, and so they're probably on track to still make the top 8. A heavy defeat to Harlequins, a heavy defeat to Toulouse, and just the general vibe up there is really poor, and a lot of players are talking to people off the record and questioning and challenging the environment and saying it's not a great place to be. And even Craig Gilroy on Viaplay pre-match, and Craig was one of those players who was let go last summer, but he said, "Oh, it's a very poor environment and there's no player-led. It's not a player-led atmosphere or culture, and that doesn't work anymore, etc." So, yeah, the writing probably was on the wall, and Dan Edwards kicks a brilliant drop goal. Dan questions a couple of the refereeing decisions, and the backlash on social media was pretty strong to that. And yeah, you just felt it was going to be difficult for them. The rumor was that they couldn't afford to make that decision to move him on. He had a year and a half.
He's under contract till the end of next season.
Yeah, so I think the general vibe was that things weren't great up there, but they're under pressure financially, and they have to reduce their playing budget significantly, and 6 players have been told they're not being kept, and some of those are kind of players you expect to be in an Ulster starting team, so it's not just fringe players. And then obviously to get rid of a coach, unless you report or unless you just reassign responsibility, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you money to replace him. So it's going to be interesting. Actually, interestingly, it'll be probably David Humphrey's first big task. I know he's not officially starting for a while, but like realistically, this should be Humphrey's decision, not Nucifora's. Humphreys is the one who's going to have to stand over it over the next cycle. Obviously, he's someone from Ulster, and it'll be interesting to see what they try and do. Do they go for a young Irish coach like Richie Murphy or Noel McNamara? I would say the name most likely to come in, if they're going to come from outside, is Jared Payne. Like the players, if they had a choice tomorrow morning, it'd be Jared Payne. And I know he hasn't gone that well with Claremont or Scarlets, but certainly when he was in Ulster, he was very highly regarded. I believe he's someone on the shortlist for Leinster to replace Andrew Goodman. So, but would he go back to Ulster as head coach? And I think Bryn Cunningham, who's director of operations, I think is his official title. He has been head of recruitment. I think you probably can go and get a young head coach and allow Bryn Cunningham do the director of rugby stuff, do the recruitment, liaise with the board. So probably their model is going to be a little bit like Leinster, where Leo does a lot of the off-field stuff, and Nina Barr or Stuart Lancaster or whatever kind of look after the rugby. Well, Dan was kind of doing both, to be fair. So they may go down for that model. And if you go down that route and you have an experienced person in that kind of recruitment role, well, then you can probably take a risk on someone who's not a proven head coach. If you know him really well, like they know Jared Payne, or Richie Murphy or Noel McNamara. But they'd be the three people I would say are most likely. But again, financially, they mightn't be able to do anything till the end of the year, or maybe even next year. They might have to just promote one of their own. I'm not sure how bad the financial situation is.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see that, and I might circle back towards the potential replacements in a couple of minutes. But like JP, from a player's point of view, when you're in that situation where you have a head coach and maybe relationships are a bit fractured and results aren't going well, like from your career, I would think of the Kieran Keane season after Pat Lam came in when you were at Connacht, and like I know he played out until the end of the season, even though I think from the outside anyway, I think a lot of us kind of assumed the writing was on the wall there and that he was going to be leaving. Like it is so uncommon to see this happen in season in Irish rugby. Like I know bizarrely it was Les Kiss who left in 2018 before Dan McFarland came in, was the other time in recent memory that it would have happened. But it just is very, very strange to see it happen mid-season like this.
Yeah, yeah, it is, Neil. And look, it's a difficult situation for everyone. For Dan, for the players that still have to go out and play for the rest of the season. I mean, like you mentioned there, that Ulster are still 8, and hopefully hunting down a playoff spot. Players that are moving on, the fans in Ravenhill. I mean, like I know Birch meant. I think I spent an hour on Sunday night scrolling down through comments on Instagram. Like there's a lot of loyal supporters up there, and they're passionate. They're outspoken. They've no problem speaking up about their views and their opinions on it. You kind of feel for everyone involved. Is Dan fully to like, if you're pointing fingers here, I don't think there's anyone that you can fully blame. There's obviously an onus on the players to go out and perform, but they're not going to perform if the environment isn't conducive to it. I have a lot of respect for Dan. I mean, like Dan built a lot of the foundations, the blocks that were there for us. When we went on to win the Pro 12 in 2015, 2016, a lot of the forward play that we used. Jimmy Duffy was our head coach, but it was Dan that laid the foundation. Or Jimmy Duffy was our forwards coach. Sorry, it was Dan that laid the foundations there in the years leading up to it. So like I see what he can do as a coach. He's a very good coach, but I don't know. It just really seems like he's lost the room. I know Birch and Don Lennon, they they covered it off on against the head. Like there has to be a certain onus on players themselves, when they are putting on the jersey. But then again, how do you, if you're not motivated, if the environment isn't, a place where you want to go out and perform, it's a tough situation. It's a very tough situation, and obviously enough, you mentioned Ulster might be under financial pressure. I wouldn't have that kind of insight or know too much about that, but then it's probably as good of to change it now and get it done and over and done with, so that they can maybe try and kick on and get to playoffs. It might, with Dan stepping away, the players then have kind of no excuse really. Mm-hmm. If they're saying the environment is not great. So yeah, look, it's a difficult scenario, and it's tough for everyone involved. Is there anyone specifically to blame? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's probably a culmination of everything, a lot of different factors, a lot of different variables thrown into one. And yeah, because you don't want to see any Irish province suffer. Definitely not. Like Ulster have some fantastic players up there, fantastic players. And when you think of players that are on their roster, whatever it is that they're not, just not performing, coach, the environment, whatever it might be, it's not good for Irish rugby. I know that much.
Yeah, and Birch, like as you said beforehand, you have to recognize the fact that as tough as the last few months have been for Ulster, and maybe as frustrated as Ulster fans have been, particularly in the last 2-3 months, that like this was a coach that came in and picked them up when they were absolutely on the floor, and probably in the worst place they have been in since the professional game arrived, and brought them back to a point where we were talking about them as contenders to win titles. And I know they ultimately didn't go on and do it, but you know, as pissed off as some Ulster fans might be over the last few months, and as pissed off as they might have been after Sunday's result in particular, there's a lot to be thankful for where Dan McFarland has brought them.
Yeah, he has. And look, I actually think he might feel it this morning, or maybe it's his decision to walk away. But I actually think in a month's time he'd be delighted to be out of there. 6 years is a long time. 6 years trying to get a team over the line, and Dan is very ambitious. And JP's 100% right. I mean, they were so close to getting that breakthrough in that Stormers game to get to a final and win silverware, and it could all be different. But the reality also is he has been managing a budget that's going downwards, and that's very difficult when you're having to let go of players. Letting go of players for underperformance is a given, and that's part and parcel of it. But letting go of players because the effectively total sum you have isn't the same as where it was the year before is very difficult, and it causes friction and it causes conflict, and it destabilizes the dressing room as well. And again, it's not something we're used to in Ireland, but certainly I think Munster, Ulster, and Connacht, it seems, are going through a little bit of cutting the fat, and look at the market. The market for professional rugby is different than it was 3 or 4 years ago, and players need to accept that it's a tougher environment. But as the head coach or the director of rugby, and you're the one delivering that bad news, you're the one making those decisions, it's very difficult, and Dan will it might come across that he doesn't have affection or care for the players, but that won't sit easy with him, and that release of pressure, for the next couple of months would be good for him. And he's always been a coach. He coached when he played. I played with him. He's a passion for it, and I would be surprised if he doesn't find a new challenge and go. The only problem is obviously with a family and stuff like that. That's the hard part of coaching, is that it might be good for you personally to get away from it, but there's a family involved, and having to potentially move school and all that kind of stuff is the hard part of it. But I think it'll be a relief for him, because certainly from experience of the Dragons, I just got fed up having fights with people about money, and eventually when that relationship broke up, and you get over the fact of feeling sorry for yourself, it's actually way better. You know what I mean? Way better. So I think it'll be a relief to him in time, and he's done enough in Glasgow and Connacht with the Irish under-20s, with Ulster, that if you're looking for someone to come in and improve your team, he's certainly going to be high on the list. So I think in time people will appreciate the fact that the job he did at the start, particularly, and so close to getting him over the line. But then and that's the killer as well. Once you don't get over the line, when that opportunity is there, it can be very difficult to have another run at.
Yeah, and that's a good point Birch made there as well, even just going back to his past in Ireland as well. And JP, I know you kind of touched on it with that he'd been, he's a Connacht stalwart as well from down the years, but we're not just talking about his time at Ulster over the last 6 years, between his playing days in Connacht, coaching days in Connacht, Ireland under-20s along the way as well. There are quite a lot of players over the last 20 years in Irish rugby that have had some sort of an influence off Dan.
Yeah, most definitely, Neil. Most definitely. Like it's and what Birch was saying there, it's nearly like it's a decision, whether it's Dan himself that's stepping away from it, or a decision within Ulster Rugby. But like it's probably the only decision that makes sense. Because like you have players, it seems like the players are saying it's a bad environment. So like if you're talking about like a business decision, you have all the players saying it's a bad environment. Players are leaving because there's no budget. Then you have the fans, the Ravenhill stalwarts. Like they were talking about boycotting some of the games on Instagram. Like when you have all that pressure from external factors and even internal, like within the squad, like I don't think he's left Dan or Ulster Rugby, wherever the decision was made. I don't think they're left with much choice or option.
Yeah.
I mean, like you were talking there about, it's odd for it to happen mid season. There's probably not any other alternative here. Realistically, Ulster uh, still have a chance making the playoffs. But with the way things are, like I know they're playing Dragons next, but like I haven't really looked at the fixture list of who they have left for the rest of the game or rest of the year. But like maybe Dan stepping away at this point in time, like might give him a bit of energy. Like a change is as good as a start sometimes. So I don't know. It's a difficult situation. But yeah, Dan, no doubt in Dan's coaching credentials. So hopefully they can move on from it and make the playoffs and draw a line in the sand and put out a few performances going into the back end of the year.
Yeah, I think they will. Look, they'll big Dragons anyway, and that'll give them a bit of feel good factor. So whoever's coming in as caretaker, I heard a rumor last night that maybe Richie Murphy will go up there. I know I said Jared Payne, but Richie Murphy, maybe he's obviously IRFU contracted. Could he go in there as interim, for the rest of the season?
Post 26 Nations.
Yeah. Like even next week, there's a follow week. Could he start for the Dragons game? And he's very highly rated. Some of those Ulster some of those Ulster youngsters have worked with him. They rave about him. Obviously, as I said, the RFU then will be given. I think the problem will be, obviously you could promote from within, but it's not a new voice. So if Ulster are looking to maximise the end of this season, they may need new voice. And this isn't like back in the day. I remember Andy Farrell did a bit with Munster. That the RFU would use their staff as such when they weren't busy to help out. So that could be a brilliant opportunity for Richie to have a taste of coaching. Gives Ulster a chance to maybe look at him. But I suppose it'll all become clear over the next 24 hours, 48 hours.
To loop back around then to what's happening beyond this season. I know, like Bert, you kind of floated a couple of names there that, Jared Payne is the one that's being talked about a lot. Still seems a little bit of a gamble just considering how the last couple of years have gone since he left Ulster. But in terms of the job itself, do you see it as an attractive job? Because on one hand, you have a pretty decent squad. The Irish system, I imagine, is something a lot of coaches want to be involved in. There's, that they're a team that realistically with the squad they have would expect to be in the Champions Cup year on year. So there's good foundations there, but also the flip side is they have this very, very uncertain budget situation that we've heard about over the last few months. There are players leaving this summer. That, I suppose, is the drawback of it. How attractive a job do you think it is?
I think it's one of the best jobs in Europe. Honestly, it is. It really is. I mean, Ulster,
even with the budget stuff at the moment.
Yeah, I think it is. I still think it is. I mean, I have a massive fan base, great stadium. I know they don't have any player. I don't think the squad is brilliant by any manner of means, but it's still more than good enough to be top 6 in the URC.
Yeah, like it's not Leinster's squad, but it's one of the better squads.
It's one of the better ones. Like when you compare them to, like, they should be able to beat Glasgow and Edinburgh at home. beat all the Welsh regions, and probably beat the South African regions at home, I think. So yeah, I think it's one of the better jobs. And also Ireland is a very attractive place to coach. I mean, look at Pete Wilkins. He's had what 5-6 years in the Irish system, as starting off as assistant coach, becoming head coach. Graham Roundtree obviously came in as assistant, but and now became head coach. Leo's there a long time. Dan has had 6 years. I mean, so head coaches will look at those type of people in Ulster and other provinces and say it's not as ruthless maybe as or as cutthroat as some of the other competitions, top 14. Richard Cocker went to Montpellier, was gone 2.5 months or 3 months in. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality of it. And someone would see this as an opportunity to do what Dan did, which is pick them back up again. You know what I mean? Pick them back up again and get them getting better results and changing the mood and environment. So no, I think it is the big thing is what the RFU, how much they want to support Ulster. I think it's a big one for Humphreys, and forget about his natural allegiance to Ulster. Like realistically, the high performance director of Irish rugby, they need a strong Ulster, and at the moment they're contributing very little to the Irish team. Like Henderson and Stockdale are great, and they're important members of the squad, but neither of them are spring chickens. You know what I mean? So who's the next cab off the rank? Who are the next Ulster players that are going to come in? At hooker they're very strong, but no one's going to take Dan Sheehan's place or Ronan Keller's place. So that's the challenge. I think that if they allow Ulster, if they don't turn out Ulster, it's not great for Irish rugby. And again, I said them against the head. Look at the league table. We've got 3 provinces who aren't guaranteed at the moment to make the top 8, and that's not brilliant. That's not brilliant. There's 3 provinces who are not going to win Europe this year. And again, that's not great. So I think there's work to be done.
Certainly is. Well, look, we'll put a pin in the Ulster chat for now because we probably should have news later on this afternoon. By the time you're listening to this, it could all be out in the open. We could know who the interim head coach is. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. We will move on to the Six Nations because we've somehow gone 20 plus minutes into this podcast and Bernard Jackman has magically transported from one location to another, and we haven't even talked about the Six Nations yet.
So I had to talk to a man about a dog, about Ulster, so I had to move. Sorry, lads.
Oh, look, I mean, my editing skills, people won't even notice. It'll be seamless. But look,
that Richie Murphy news might be worth the break.
On to the Six Nations, JP, Ireland and Wales this Saturday. Yesterday's big news was that Caelan Doris sat out training. No specific injury, according to Simon Easterby, just a few bumps and bruises, he says. The quote Simon Easterby gave doesn't fill me with the greatest amount of confidence. To quote him exactly, we don't expect him not to be fully fit for the weekend. So there's a couple of qualifiers in that. We don't expect him to not be fully fit for the weekend. It's very, very rare in this Irish setup that players who don't train on a Tuesday would play on the match day. But considering Caelan Doris has played the last 31 matches for Ireland, started 30 of them, would he be an exception to that rule if he was to train today?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, he's a fantastic player. I don't know if that's ruled within the Irish camp that you don't train on a Tuesday.
Well, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's more just kind of like from what we've seen over the last few years, it's very, very rare to see it. But you do get the feeling if you were to be taking a risk on a player, Caelan Doris is someone that you'd be willing to do it with.
Yeah, but do they need to take that risk against Wales? I don't know. I mean, what would the squad? What would the pack look like? Would you think if Caelan Doris wasn't available? What would they do?
Just straight swap Conan.
Yeah. I mean, Jack Cohen's a fantastic player. Obviously Caelan Doris has the number 8 jersey. But if Jack Conan got the start there at the weekend against Wales, I don't think we'd be losing too much. If I'm being honest about it. Powerful, great ball carrier, has great ball skills. He's a big man, well able to get over the gain line. It's only that Caelan Doris has been so excellent over the last 31 games, did you say?
Yeah, 31 in a row for Ireland.
yeah, like to even be fit for 31 games. That's that alone in itself is an achievement. So, like Jack Conan has performed in the Irish jersey, time and time again. Anytime he's got a chance to play, anchoring the scrum there as a number 8, I think he's been fantastic. I'd be a big fan of Jack Conan. I don't think we'd lose too much if Caelan Doris didn't play at the weekend. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, like, depends on how much those niggles are, or the expectation of. I don't expect him to not be fit. Like, how much of a risk is it to put him onto the pitch on Saturday? But yeah, like, I don't. If Jack Conan goes in there, I don't think we'd be losing too much.
How do you feel about that, Birch? Would you be willing to just not take the risk this weekend and give Jack Conan a run out?
Yeah, I don't think there's hard and fast rules anymore about training on a Tuesday or whatever, like there was with Joe. But I actually would. I think Conan is a quality option. I think we have like Ryan Baird as well, who was outstanding against Italy. So I think it's a real strong message to those players. If someone has a knock, someone's not 100% sure, right, that they don't have to play. And yeah, I would have no issue with Conan starting and Pete coming back in as captain and Ryan Baird on the bench. I think it's still very, very strong.
The good news is that the handful of players who sat out the win against Italy with the minor little niggles, the likes of Peter O'Mahony, Tyg Furlong, Bundy Aki, are more than likely going to be coming back in this week. Gary Ringrose, it seems, is fit, but we're not sure whether or not they're going to put him straight back in. They might just give him another extra week, considering we've the break week coming up after Wales, and reward the likes of Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose and Bundy Aki and Stuart McCloskey for doing quite well over these few weeks. But the big decision is going to be at full back. Bartek, obviously we spoke about it last week. We were debating whether it be Kieran Frawley or maybe you put Jack Crowley back there to see how he goes. And there's plenty of options you can do without there being one standout one. I think the closer we're getting to it, it seems more likely that it's probably going to be Kieran Frawley that'll get the start. JP, I suppose a lot of the talk over the last week has been this has maybe exposed our lack of depth at full back ever so slightly. Considering we've been very, very reliant on Hugo Keenan over the last few years. But I don't know how you're feeling on it. My take on it would be personally that I think we might be overblowing the lack of depth line a little bit too much, considering like we're debating here over who the fourth choice fullback is going to be.
Yeah.
Like I think people are kind of forgetting maybe that in normal circumstances, if Hugo Keenan gets injured, Mac Hansen goes in there or Jimmy O'Brien goes there. And I think any international team, if they lose their first 3 options at full back, it's probably not going to be obvious who the next person is going to be.
Yeah, like talk about the depth of the squad. Obviously you have 3 players that would put on a 15 jersey there that are unavailable. Like what you said, Neil. Take 3 possible fullbacks out of any squad in the world, and I don't think you're reaching down there an awful lot. It'd be interesting to know. Like I know Wales, they announced the team yesterday. What the Irish lads will probably announce it tomorrow. I'd be very interested to see who they put in. Who they put in at 15. I mean, like Kieran Frawley, Jack Crowley. Yeah, two good options. And like, is there other options there? Could you put James Lowe in at 15? I don't know who would go on to the wing then. I'm more maybe thinking out loud than anything else. But like, say if you put Crowley in at 15, is it Ross Byrne or Harry Byrne that goes in at 10? Probably Harry Byrne, right? Yeah, it's hard to know. I don't have an answer. Definitely a pain in the head, but it's not like there's no option there. I mean, like any of those other players, Frawley, maybe Crowley. I don't know if they'd move Crowley back to full back, to be honest. They could do. I don't know. Honestly, don't know.
How do you feel, Birch, on not so much who will play this weekend, but the idea of the lack of fullback depth?
Yeah, it's obviously a bit of an issue, and we've been so lucky that Keenan
Yeah.
has been pretty much bulletproof. I would either go for Crowley or Frawley, and certainly rumor the RDS on Saturday was that Frawley was the one who was going to get the start, and again, as I said last week, I just think both of those are well. I think Crowley will be our number 110, but if one of those other tens pushes through late in the game, he may have to go to fullback, or I know he's played centre as well before, and likewise Frawley's played 10 centre or fullback, and was on the bench against Ireland, against France when we went 6-2. So just thinking about giving those type players, so Harry Byrne, Jack Crowley, and Kieran Frawley, who are young, inexperienced at this level, just game time, and that was my thoughts. But rumor is it's going to be Frawley, and I have no issue with that. Like I think he's more than capable, and to see him get valuable minutes in a Six Nations game is class.
The Wales team was named yesterday, as JP mentioned. Warren Gatland just deciding to hell with it. I'll lay my cards out on the table, and you can see what they are, and you can go from there. We've nothing to lose anyway. One change from the side that started against England: Sam Costello in it, out half for Ian Lloyd. Birch, if you're Warren Gatland, like I was looking at it yesterday, Ireland, according to the bookies, are 22-point favourites. I can't ever remember a time that Ireland would be 22-point favourites in a Six Nations game against Wales. It's very, very, it's uncharted territory for both teams, really. So
Yeah,
if you're if you're Warren Gatland and you're going into this game, what's a tangible expectation for them going into this game? If they're heading on to their next match in 2 weeks' time, I can't even remember who they are playing in the next one up.
France.
Playing France next time up. What is something tangible that they can take from this weekend? And I don't mean to be patronizing saying that, like patting them on the head saying, "Oh, well, you're not going to win this weekend." But realistically, if you look where the two teams are, Wales have certain expectations going into this game. What do you think they can take from it?
No, look, I think a bonus point would be incredible, or that's a 4-try bonus, which again, looking how Ireland have been defending, that looks unlikely. Or getting them within 7, which they have done the last 2 games against England and Scotland. I think that'd be a huge bonus for them. I don't think Ireland would have to underperform in a massive way to see Wales get a win here. But I think Gatland is very happy with his team. In terms of, obviously that first half against Scotland was shocking, but since then, like they went to England against a team who'd lost a World Cup semi-final narrowly in Twickenham, and all the talk about a new Twickenham and a new atmosphere and a new way of playing, and they really put it up to England. Now, I think England are still trying to find their way, and I think there's a gulf in class, and Ireland look to be a good bit ahead of everybody else. And in fairness, the others are all rebuilding to a certain extent, and we aren't. So, like, doesn't mean that necessarily we're miles better than them, but the rest are all thinking about something different. And I think Gatland would be delighted if they just show the same fight. They take Ireland out of their comfort zone. They make it difficult for us. And I like that Gatland is someone who wants to win, but he looks at that squad. He has to realize, and he does realize, that this is a complete rebuild. And the fastest way and the best way to rebuild is by being competitive. And if you can be competitive in Dublin, they'll fancy themselves to beat France, who look a little bit off, and then beat Italy, and suddenly, you've 2 wins, 2 losing bonus points, and maybe something out of the Irish game. And it's been a hell of a championship, I think, given how the Welsh rugby is off the field. That would be an unbelievable Six Nations for him. I would say, where he is now, obviously compared to the Welsh teams he's had in the past, it will be a poor Six Nations. But I just think you look at some of those players, some of them hardly played regional rugby, aren't household names, have to prove themselves, and that would be a big result for them.
And JP, like the way he's gone about things in the last year since he came in, it's like, I think if you're one of the players, it probably reflects well on him that he came in. And I think initially when he got the job back just over a year ago, there might have been people thinking, okay, he's back trying to win one last Six Nations title before riding off into the sunset. the fact that he's kind of torn things up and started from scratch pre-World Cup, it does it send a message to the players that this guy's kind of here for the long haul, and he's he's thinking about a long-term project rather than just trying to eke out one more win to add to his CV.
Yeah, but potentially, Neil. Like I can't remember who. Maybe it was one of the media press conferences during the week. I think it was Simon Easterby was highlighting that within the Welsh camp, when Warren Gatland talks, everybody listens and everybody takes on board what he says, and you can see that. You can see that in him. Like, talk about man management. Like, they haven't got results, but what Birch said, yeah, reading between the lines, he seems happy with what they've been doing so far. Like, realistically, for the weekend, there's only one team that can lose, and that's Ireland. And I know that sounds a bit airy fairy, but the way you look at it is, right, Wales are going over to play, and they have a lot of work to do in terms of where their squad is at the moment, where they potentially want to get to. If they go over and perform, if they go over and like stand tall in their Welsh jersey, puff out their chest, and really, go at the Irish. Personally, I think even if they do that, it won't be enough to beat Ireland. But if they perform, and if they don't just go into their shells, like that's a win for them. I know, like, you're looking at tangible measurables, like whether it's before, try bonus or get within 7. Yeah, most definitely. But the actual performance itself is probably what Gatland will be trying to focus on going over to play Dub. And yeah, like like they've nothing to lose. They've nothing to lose, only to go out. And like you see it, say, for the performance in the second half against Scotland, they were essentially bet at halftime. Like, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to hear what Gatland said to them at halftime, because they came out in the second half and they just played. They just played rugby. They'll probably try and do something, like that against Ireland. Just go out and play, just play rugby. I don't think they'll probably get as close to Ireland as they did to Scotland, if they do that for 80 minutes. But I think it'll be more the performance rather than, winning the game. So I hope I'm not eating my words here. I'm not trying to, like what you said, be patronizing, but I think that's the way they'll approach Saturday.
Yeah, like I just am so wary of this section of the conversation being clipped up and posted all over like Wales Online or something like that on Sunday morning after Ireland are beat. But it's an interesting situation Ireland are in now as well, Birch, where I remember after the Italy game a couple of weeks ago, Gonzalo Quesada, the Italy head coach, he said that Ireland are at this point now where it's like the All Blacks of a few years ago, where when they get you pinned down, it's foot on the throat and they're absolutely ruthless. I think maybe they're a couple of gears off what the All Blacks were, but they have to be at a point now, Ireland, where they're in game. If they're in games like this, where there's a massive expectation on them to win and win well, that they go out and be quite ruthless about it, and not just try win the game by your 5 or 10 points or get the victory, but to really, really make a statement in these games.
I think if they were in black, you'd say they were the All Blacks. That's the
okay.
order. And in fairness, this is different than most years. I think if we talk like we've spoken, 2 years ago, it would be picked up by Welsh media and it would come across as really arrogant. But even the Welsh pundits, reporters, journalists, fans, they do understand that there's a gulf in class based around what we've seen over the last 2-3 years. And this Irish team are, like, their ability to get bonus point wins, their ability to be consistent, and obviously what is it, 19 or 20 games or whatever, 20 or 19 or 20 or 21, like, it is week in, week out when they play, they've been able to perform, whether they're underdogs or whether they're favorites, and that's something that other countries have really struggled to do, and they do deserve a lot of credit for that, and that's why the bookies have them 22 points favorite. And everyone's expecting it to be a formality. Of course, things can change. But again, like I'd be worried about England more. So I'd be worried about the England game. Not that I don't think we're better than England, but I think England have the players who've won things. They have a game plan which potentially can take the sting out of ours, etc., etc. Whereas with Wales, Gatland's mantra is play, and as JP said, but I don't think that's enough. You know, it's grand against England away from home, keep the ball against Scotland when you're 27 points down, but realistically, like Ireland look to have the answers to that as well, and yeah, I just think it does sound arrogant, but I think we have to expect that the result will be a bit of a formality.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you want to be the best in the world, you have to act like the best in the world. Before we finish up, I do want to mention Scotland England, 4:45 game this Saturday, because it is set up really, really interestingly, JP, just with the way both teams have gone in the competition so far. England 2 wins, not really played brilliantly, but going about their business all right and have plenty of scope to get better. And they've got players coming back from injury. I know they've lost Alex Mitchell as well, but they do have, Ollie Lawrence, Manu Tuilagi coming back in and probably available for them if they want them. Scotland then, on the other hand, seems to completely rattle themselves after that game against France, but over the last few years have made a very, very good habit of getting themselves up for this game against England. So there's no fear on their part of taking on an English team. It's set up very, very well.
Yeah, I think it'll be the fixture of the weekend. It's hard to know. Like, who would you be, from an Irish perspective? Like, who would you be hoping wins here? I wonder.
I'd personally, if you're asking me, I would
Yeah.
be hoping that Scotland win, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I think if Ireland are going to England in 2 weeks' time against an England team that have won 3 games out of 3 and have kind of incrementally seen their performance get a little bit better, I think they will absolutely fancy their chances of having a crack off Ireland.
Yeah, and I like the take the that for the Six Nations. Like, if Scotland beat England, and Ireland beat England, are Scotland still on the last game? No, taken for granted, and this is a big taken for granted that Ireland beat Wales, Ireland beat England.
Yeah, and Scotland beat Italy, and yeah.
This is going to sound terrible, and you're talking about.
Don't say it then. Don't hang yourself.
Scotland slam busting on the last day.
I think if Scotland have a chance to win a Grand Slam against Ireland, I think they'd crumble under the pressure of it. I don't know who I want to win.
Well, no, like, it would be just they don't have a chance to win the title rather than the Grand Slam.
Sorry, apologies.
France,
They lost.
Chance of winning the title.
Yeah, but so like, if there's, I haven't done the permutations on the table, but like, if Scotland could, like, if there was an opportunity there for them to beat Ireland on the last day of the Six Nations, I prefer Ireland to be going for a Grand Slam and Scotland have a bit of pressure on them, saying that, okay, we can win this if we could win the championship. I don't think they'd handle that pressure very well, so I don't know. There's just so many variables involved with it, but there you go.
How are you feeling about this Saturday's game then, Merch? Because, like, we spoke before the Six Nations, and you kind of mentioned it there as well, how England had a nice draw of games in this, where Italy first, then Wales, then Scotland, and there was the scope for them that they were able to just kind of build their performances week on week. And if they were to do that this week against Scotland, they're on track for a massive game against Ireland at Twickenham. Like, how are you feeling this weekend?
Yeah, I did a pod last week with Jim Hamilton and Stuart Hogg, and it was the first half hour we're talking about Scotland, and then they said to me, "Oh, do you think England have a chance?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually think England will win."
Have a chance?
No, this was like, it was very. I was like, I against England, I was like, "Yeah, I actually think England will have a very good chance of winning," because I think if the game is tight, I would fancy England all day.
Yeah,
and again, can Scotland run away from them? They probably can. Like, there's elements of, there's weaknesses in this English defense as Felix Jones gets to basically build it, if you understand. And like, we saw Wales exploit it, but I just don't know where Scotland's head's going to be at. Like, I mean, they found like they found a way to nearly fuck up an unbelievable opportunity in Cardiff. Don't get the bonus point at the end. And then blow a win against France, where France were putrid. The France were really, really poor. So put on top of that, the World Cup exit, the previous World Cup exit. Like I feel really sorry for Gregor Townsend. I think there's only so, like talking about Dan McFarland 6 years. Like there's only so many times Gregor on a Monday morning can really reframe it and convince them that they are the greatest team ever in Scottish history. Like when they haven't really backed it up. They've had a few scalps. They've beaten a poor England team a couple of times over the last couple of years. They've beaten France, but when it's been put up to them, they've always flattered to deceive. So I think England's game will be exactly what Scotland will hate to play against, and I think England will squeeze them and get a win in Murrayfield, and it'll all come down to Twickenham then. And I don't think England are brilliant, but I think that they've more than Scotland at the moment, I believe.
And crucially as well, I think, Birch, like if you're bringing back one or both of Ollie Lawrence / Manu Tuilagi, like the England attack hasn't been particularly good in those opening 2 games, but having a big gain line winner in midfield there would be a massive addition to what they're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the problem. That's been an area where they've been kind of caught a little bit. So they're playing, George Ford with, a lot of the Northampton backs who are used to playing a certain way. And when they weren't able to kind of get to wit quickly, they didn't have that alternate type play, which they'll get with Ollie Lawrence or Manu Tuilagi. And I actually think Ollie Lawrence on form is a better shot because he kind of Manu on his best is brilliant, but I think that Ollie Lawrence gives him that carry plus ability to offload and passing game. He's been excellent this year. So yeah, I think that's a huge boost for Borthwick and will make them more dangerous.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. Give us your final prediction then for the Scotland and England game, 4:45 on Saturday before we finish up.
England by 4.
JP?
Scotland by 1. I'll go against you, Birch.
Okay.
JP is setting up a Six Nations decider at the Aviva Stadium on St. Patrick's weekend against Scotland.
With the hope of Scotland blowing
it. Well, listen, we've a huge amount of rugby coming up in the next few days on RTÉ. 2 Ireland against Wales. That is Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Coverage starts on RT2 and RT Player. You can also listen to live commentary on RTÉ Radio 1. We'll also be showing France against Italy on Sunday from 2:30 p.m. Coverage starts on RT2 and RT Player. And also the Ireland under-20s in action on Friday night down in Cork against Wales, 7:15 p.m. start on RT2 and RT Player. And also keep track of the RT News app and rt.ie/sport for all the updates and team news over the next few days. Fellas, thanks a million, and we'll speak to you next week.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Neil.